Module 8, we're working on building an application. And when we build an application, a couple things that we learn. First, we want to use defined names whenever possible. Defined names are a better way of referencing cells than B8 or C7 or whatever it might be. So we built this ticket spreadsheet so far, and we also realized that some of our logic is dependent upon what is entered into particular cells. One thing we got to finish up is this transfer data area. I believe. So you guys bring up theater workbook where we left off, if you would. And in this transfer data area, we need to move some things over here. So if you go to transfer area, we want to put in here. We want to put in the name of the purchase. So put an equal, and then click on B4. And B4, as you know, is a defined name subscriber. So we have Michael Keller in there. The next thing we want in the next field is equal, and then we want the invoice date. So that is in B3. Okay. The next thing we want in the transfer area is the number of tickets sold. So that would be ticket quantity, which is B8. Next thing we want in this transfer area, we're going to put the equal sign. We would like the total cost of tickets, which is J18, or ticket cost. And then finally, we want the total amount of the transaction. So we're going to put an equal J22, which is the total invoice. Now all I'm doing there is creating basically a record that I'm eventually going to add to a list or a spreadsheet that you see over here on ticket data. Okay. So are we all there? We're all at this point? Okay, so what we're going to talk about then in the next section is we understood that sometimes our logic, our branching logic, is based off of what someone enters in, okay? And I think I told you when we build an application, we have to build it for the lowest common denominator, meaning we can't assume that people are going to enter the right information in. We can't assume that they're going to understand the spreadsheet. We can't assume that they're not going to try to shove a name into a number field or a number into a name field. Okay, so a lot of times we go through a process called data validation, because if we can stop the garbage from coming into our spreadsheet, it's going to make our logic that much better. Okay, so one of the big things in programming world is garbage in, garbage out. So if we can stop the garbage from coming in, we can keep the garbage from coming out. So what we'd want to do here, let's look at ticket quantity. Okay, let's look at cell B4. Okay, cell B4. What do you think? What kind of validation do we want to put in ticket quantity? What kind of things do you think we want to put in there? First of all, what? Whole number. It's going to be a whole number. I can't buy 4.5 tickets. It has to be a number as well. I can't buy J number of tickets. What else? Perhaps I want to make sure that it's in a range. I don't want to be able to I don't want people to be able to buy too many tickets. So where data validation is if we go up to, we're on B4 or B8 right now, I'm sorry. If we go to data, under data tools, under the data group, you guys see data validation? Okay. I want you to click on the drop down for data validation. And under that drop down, there's another data validation. Click on that. And there are 3 tabs here. The first one is settings. So this is where I set what I want to allow. The second tab is input message. This is the input message that I'm going to provide the user so they know what the hell to put in here. And then finally, the third one is if I wanted to throw out an error. There's different types of errors, so we're going to talk about that. So
let's say we want to allow, and we're going to change to whole number. Okay. Now, one thing that you see here is that ignore blank is checked, and that's fine. It means if it's blank, don't data validate. You know what I mean? Don't make sure it's a whole number. Blanks are acceptable there. Okay, blanks are acceptable there. If we uncheck the blank, it would throw out an error if it was a blank. It would say, no, it has to be a number. So just leave that checked for now. And you should get data between. Do you guys get that, data between? Okay. We're going to say we want to apply that it has to be between 1 and 19. Okay, between 1 and 19. And I'm going to click OK. So try to enter, now that we did that, try to enter a K in there. And you'll see, or whatever you'd like to enter in there, you'll see it throws out an error message that says, the value entered is not valid. The user has restricted values that can be entered into this cell. So I can retry, I can cancel, I can go for help. Now what's wrong with that? What's wrong with that message? As far as building an application, professional application, what's wrong with that message?
Doesn't really describe what's wrong.
Yeah, it's very vague, very general, right? So I want to give more information. So a couple things, I'm going to cancel here. It's going to go back to 4. Let's go back to, we're still on B8. Go back to data validation, go back to data validation, and let's go to input message. Okay, so let's first give them some information so that they know what the hell should go in there. I guess it's pretty obvious what should go in there, but let's tell them what should go in here. So title, let's say number of tickets, and the input message is the number of tickets purchased should be between 1 and 19. And click OK. Now, all that does is now you notice, click up the A1 if you would, or somewhere else on the spreadsheet. And now when I click back onto B8, we see that message. Okay, so when that cell is selected, that gives us that information. So it gives us some information to the user. It didn't change. If I try to enter K in here again, you see we got the same old message. Okay, that same general message. So where we'll change that is a little bit different. So I'm going to cancel. I'm going to go to data, data validation. And here is the error alert. This is where we control what error alert that we see. So it says the checkbox first is show error alert when invalid data is entered. That's checked. When user enters invalid data, show this error alert. So there's a couple different options here. Okay, so stop says prevent it from happening. Don't let anything in there that's not valid. Another option, if you see, there's different, and it comes with different sounds too, is warning. What warning will do is it will put up a message, but it'll allow me to override it. You know what I'm saying? We can say, well, I know that's what you said between 1 and 19, but this guy bought 25 tickets, so click OK. But it still puts out the message. Information is information only. Okay? It just says, yeah, you entered something wrong. You deal with it whatever you like. Let's put it as warning. Okay, let's put it as warning at this point. And let's say title, invalid entry, invalid, let's say number of ticks. Ticks should be between 1 and 19. And click OK. So now if I put in 25 and hit enter, okay, it comes up with a warning message. Remember before it was a red, it said it like stopped us. It said an invalid number of ticks, that was the title we put in, should be between 1 and 19, continue, yes or no. So the warning allows them to override it. So if we say yes, okay, we'll be okay and it'll accept
that 25. We're saying, we know a little bit better than this application. So it depends what kind of field it is if you want to, force it to be closed or whatever it might be. Now, the thing about data validation is it only validates upon entry, okay? Which means it only checks the condition when you enter new data into a cell. If I added data validation to a cell, for example, let's go up to the subscriber, okay, which is Michael Keller. Okay, let's say this is B4, I believe. I know this is no good, but let's say we're going to put data validation on here, and we're going to say it has to be a date. I know it doesn't, but let's just say it has to be a date and click OK. Oops. Now let's change it to, I don't know, we'll change it to whole number. Between 1 and 50, I don't care. And click OK. Now I put data validation on that, but you notice it didn't throw out because it already existed. Because if I try to enter in now, it's going to throw out that message. But because it already exists, it's kind of like a loophole or a grandfathered clause. But what we can do is sometimes we can also identify invalid data validations after the fact. So if we go to data validation, and under data validation, the second one there, you'll see circle invalid data. Click on circle invalid data. Okay, and it circles both of those. Why? Well, it circles this because I said it had to be a whole number and it's not, okay, which is not good anyways. And it circles this one because it says it has to be between 1 and 20, and we entered 25, but that was because we forced it, right? We overrode it to be 25. So that's one way we can see data after we enter it. So let's clear those circles, clear validation circles. They're gone. And I'm going to go to B4 again because I really didn't want that data validation. And I'm going to clear all there. And now it takes it back to any value can be there. What else do you think is be important in this? Obviously we could put, the invoice date, probably be important to data validate. But remember we had logic we put into this cost over here. What was some of the things that were very critical that they be correct if we want to get the right ticket price? What were a couple of things that were very critical if we want to get the right ticket price?
Series.
Yeah, the series for sure, okay? So let's look at the series. Okay, let's put in data validation for that one. In the series of the ticket, we could have A through F. So let's go to B9. Let's go up to data validation. And we can also put in here a list, okay? So we're going to say allow a list. And when it says allow a list, it says, all right, what list of items do you want? Well, we already have the list of items in this spreadsheet. So I'm going to click on the collapse button here. And I'm going to highlight A16 through A21. So the list of acceptable items are in A16 through A21. Just for, I'm going to do it real quick because we already did it. Input message, let's put series must be between A and F. And in this case, I'm going to put a stop on this. Because I don't want anything other than A through F in there. Because if not, I'm not going to be able to look up the right ticket price. Let's go back to settings. Now let's leave it open. Let's say OK. Okay, I want you to see also, there was a data validation that said, on the settings, it said in cell dropdown. Did you see that checkbox? Well, now it gave me, remember you guys said one of the ways to validate data would be to, instead of giving a free format cell, give a dropdown. You see now this does have a dropdown with the list that we provided. So, you know, I can go through anywhere. If I try to enter an M, you know, it's going to stop it. Let's go to C. Okay. The last one we're going to do is the orchestra and balcony. Remember, because we had an if statement predicated on that. If it was orchestra, we did one thing. If not, we did something else. So let's do orchestra balcony. So if I go to B10, go up to data validation, allow a list. My source data in this case looks like it's B15 through C15. Okay, so data validation can be very useful to limit the type of data that gets into my spreadsheet, especially when I'm doing calculations based on it, basically when I have conditional formatting or conditional statements based on it, like ifs or VLOOKUPs. The other aspect of this that we're going to talk about, if we were to hand this over to a person, we were to hand this over to a user, we will want to make sure that they don't screw it up. Okay, when I say screw it up, I mean we have some formulas in here. I want to make sure that they don't accidentally delete those formulas. I want to make sure that they don't accidentally change the format. I want to make sure that they don't render it invalid, if you will. Okay. Well, there's something else we can do with cells in a worksheet to protect them. What aspect of this worksheet do you think we want to protect or unprotect? What aspect of this worksheet do you think we want to protect or unprotect?
B2 to K23.
What do we want to do with what did you say, B2 to K23?
E2.
E2, we definitely don't want that. We want that to be what, Robbie?
Valid.
Well, protected, right?
Yeah.
So they can't touch it, okay? And in fact, down here, you know, the ticket price table, probably the same thing, right? It is what it is. We don't want them to have the opportunity to change that, okay? Every cell in a worksheet has a property on it called locked or unlocked, okay? But it's not really validated or it's not really enacted unless I lock the worksheet. Let's go up to, let's pick any of these. Let's pick, it doesn't matter, let's go to A3 and go up to Home, the Home tab. And in the font group, which is kind of a crazy place for it, but click on the Expand Dialog. And that's where we see all the things like, do you have a question, Lorraine? Okay, you see all the things like number, alignment, font, border, fill. And on the far right, we see protection, okay? And by default, every cell in the worksheet is locked, but I can access them. The reason is, by default, the worksheet itself isn't locked, okay? Like this is turned to lock, but I haven't initiated locking sequence, I guess. It sounds like a 5-5 thing, but I haven't initiated the locking,
Okay, so by default, everything is locked. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to change the property of the cells that I want the user to change only to unlocked. So I'm going to highlight, we'll just cancel that. I'm going to highlight B3 down to B12. I'm going to go back to that property, font protection, and I'm going to unlock those. And I click OK. Now I changed the property on those cells, but you can see I can still go to every cell, including the ones over here I don't want anyone to go to. That's because I haven't engaged locking or protecting the worksheet, if you will. So I'm going to go up here to Review, and up under Review is where I can turn protection on the worksheet. So you see where it says Protect Sheet? Click on Protect Sheet. Okay. Now it says Protect Worksheet and Contents of Locked Cells. I can give, and there's all kind of options I can give for locked cells. I can say don't allow it to select locked cells, or allow it to select unlocked cells, format columns. I can allow them to insert columns or not. Usually we don't. You know, if we don't want them screwing around with formulas, we probably don't want them inserting rows or deleting rows. I'm going to change this to say just allow them to select unlocked cells. That's it. So if we uncheck select locked cells, all we have checked is select unlock cells. I click OK. Now you'll see, try to click on any part of the worksheet, and you can't, except for those cells that we unlocked with the property. So now we're fairly certain that the person isn't going to screw that up. Now, they could, if they had this knowledge or ability to do so, they could go up here and see the unprotect sheet. They can unprotect the sheet and then do whatever they want. But let's unprotect the sheet. Okay, so now I've unprotected it, so now I can do anything I want. I could protect the sheet, and I could make it password protected. So I could put in a password here if I like. I'm not going to because, well, you can do it if you like. But I can password protect this so that for them to unprotect the sheet, they need to enter in the right password. You know what I'm saying? Instead of just clicking on the button, once they click on unprotect sheet, it's going to say, what is the password? If you leave it blank, well, then you leave it blank. Okay. While we're up here, let's say select lock cells as well. Let's check that just to show you the difference. So now I have select unlock cells, select lock cells. Okay, now I can select lock cells, but you see I can't change them. Okay, I can select them, but I can't change the contents of them. Okay, along with protecting worksheets, and all I did was protected that individual worksheet, I can protect the workbook. So right now, if I right-click on Invoice, you see it allows me to do anything I want with this workbook. I can delete this worksheet if I like. I can rename it. I can move or copy it. All those good things. Under Review, you'll see I could also protect the workbook. Okay, and I'm going to protect the structure of the workbook. I click OK, and now you'll see if I right-click, it doesn't allow me to do those kind of things. It doesn't allow me to delete the worksheet. It's part of the workbook. It doesn't allow me to rename or anything to that effect.
Okay, so another way to provide, one way to provide user input, let's unprotect the sheet and let's unprotect the workbook. Get back to where it was. Another way to provide user input is via comments. Okay, so I'm sure you guys have used maybe comments in Word before, but I can also use them in Microsoft Excel. So let's go up to, let's pick B3. And under the Review tab, we can insert a new comment. So the comment goes with whatever your installation name is. This is Workstation. What does yours say?
Mine's
Manager. Probably most of yours are manager then. Yours is user. Okay. When I do it in my home, it says John Miko because that's how I installed it. When I do it in my office, it says JSM FA1 because that's what I'm known when they installed it. So I'm going to say Workstation. I'm going to put this is the date of the sale. Okay. And the reason I know there's a comment now is you see in the corner of that cell there's a little red triangle, and that shows me when I click on that cell, if I highlight over there, it'll show me what that comment is if I mouse over it and leave my mouse there. And I can delete that comment if I like, using delete comments. Okay, any questions on those things? So what we did today, a couple things. I hope you see the usefulness of it. Data validation. Okay, so data validation, we kind of protect the worksheet because garbage in means garbage out. And we can protect on things like, whole numbers, dates, list values. We can also protect the worksheet, especially, when we're designing something that we're going to give to someone that's maybe not as familiar with Excel. We don't want them to screw it up. We can protect the worksheet. If they have a little bit of knowledge, and we really don't want them to screw it up, we can password protect it. We can put a password in that only you or I know. And we can also add comments. We can have different error messages for data validation. So that's what we covered in that section. Now this next section, you guys, any questions on that section of Module 8? Okay, this next section is a little more difficult. We're going to talk about macros. What's a macro? You guys ever used macros before, or enabled macros, or you've seen enable macros, right? You maybe brought up a spreadsheet and it says, hey, this spreadsheet has macros. You ever see that message? What does it usually say when you see that message?
You have to enable.
Yeah, why by default are macros disabled, I guess, when you open a worksheet? Why do you think so? Macros are like little programs. They do things. They do little things, okay? And we can save them and they can be attached to a worksheet. So what people would do is they'd write malicious macros, viruses, if you will. And when you'd open a worksheet or a spreadsheet, it would run that macro and that virus would, use your resources or do whatever it might be. So by default, Excel disables macros and says you need to enable them, all right? So a lot of times you'll bring up a worksheet, maybe especially in Excel, if you guys remember bring up, we use some macros in Excel. It says macros disabled, you have to enable, right? You guys have seen that? Well, a couple things. Let's take a look at that first, okay? So, well, the first thing, let's go to the Backstage view. Does anyone have the Developer tab at this point? You see the tabs up above. Does anyone have a tab called Developer? You do, Brandon?
Yeah.
Do you use it in another class or something, Brandon?
No, I looked on like YouTube because I tried to learn them.
Oh,
years
okay.
ago.
All right.
So most of us don't have the developer tab enabled, including this computer here. So let's go to Backstage View. That's when we go to File and look at this stuff. This is the Backstage View of Excel. And I'm going to go to Options. And let's go to Customize Ribbon. And we could customize anything. Like, for example, we could have, if we want to get rid of View tab or Data tab or Formulas tab, you know, we can do that as well. But in our case, all we want to do is we want to turn on the Developer tab. So click on Developer tab and click OK. So now you have the Developer tab turned on. We can set, in the Developer tab, we can set macro security. So let's take a look at that. So under Developer tab, go to Macro Security and click on that, and we'll see what it's set at. Okay, this one says Enable All Macros, which is highly not recommended because of the ability to have viruses. Let's change ours to Disable All Macros with Notification. What that means is that's kind of is that what yours is probably right now? Disable, that's what the standard one is. That's where it says, hey, there was macros in this spreadsheet, we disabled them, would you like to enable them? They give you the choice to know, like, do I trust this source or not? Is it from, you know, a hacker, or is it from, you know, my professor, whatever it might be. So I'm going to say disable all macros with notification and click OK. Okay. Now, there's two ways to write a macro. Okay, the first one is to develop it in Visual Basic. Okay, you guys ever heard of Visual Basic? Some of you may have taken Visual Basic. Anyone take Visual Basic programming? Okay. You take a Visual Basic programming, that's one way we can develop macros. They're little programs that run in spreadsheets. And they're used to automate tasks. Okay, think about maybe repetitive tasks that you do. What's nice when a computer does a task is it does it much faster than you or I can do it, plus it does it the same damn way every time. When I do a task, you know, I might be able to do it 3 or 4 times the same way, but I'm human, right? So I'm going to screw up once in a while. So if there's some kind of repetitive task that we want the computer to do, and it's very structured, we can design something called a macro, all right? The other way, we're not going to learn how to code VB because that's another level of knowledge that we don't have time to cover. But the other way we can design macros is we can record them, okay? When we record a macro, it'll record all the steps you make so that we can do it over and over and over again. So we're going to record a macro to take this data, and then you see the little white area, okay? That person entered in some data. This little white area is the invoice, okay? And we want to create a PDF of that invoice so the person can have a printed copy of their invoice. So here's what we're going to do. If you go up to, let's select A1. Let's go up to A1. It's very important that we're very deliberate with the steps we take when we record a macro because it records everything we do. So if we screw something up, it'll screw it up every time it runs the macro, right? If you delete and re-add, it'll delete and re-add every time, which, you know, it does it so fast that it's probably not a big deal. But, you know, it's very important that we are very deliberate in these steps. So let's go up here to A1, and I'm going to go to Record Macro. And as soon as I hit Record Macro, it comes up here and asks me what I want the name of my macro to be. I'm going to type in here PDF invoice. And it says, where do you want the shortcut key to enact it? which these don't always work because, let's put P in there. So it's going to be Control-Shift-P. Okay, Control-Shift-P is going to be the shortcut to do it. Now macros, as I said, are little bits of code, okay, and they need to be stored somewhere. So we can store macros in one of three places. First place we can store them is we can store them as part of a workbook. Okay, we can store them as part of a workbook. We're going to store this one as part of this workbook. We can also store it as a personal, in our personal macro workbook library. And this is stored on your computer, basically, so that no matter what workbook you're working with in Excel, you have access to that macro. You know, whether you're in, I don't know, quarterly statements or accounting statements, you have access to that macro. So it kind of belongs with your computer. The other thing we can do is we can design a macro that's stored in a separate spreadsheet altogether. Okay, and that spreadsheet is the macro. So I open up that spreadsheet, and I basically open up the macro as well. In this case, let's leave it as this workbook. Okay, let's store it in this workbook. And click OK. Two things have happened now. Okay, if you notice up in the code area where it says Record Macro, that button changed now to a little stop button. It says Stop Recording. I'm in record mode right now. And down here in the status bar, you see the stop button as well. So I'm in record mode. It's going to record whatever I do at this point. What I'm going to do is I'm going to print this invoice. And I'm going to print just this invoice, not everything around it. So how I will do that is I want to select E2 down to K23. Then go to Page Layout. Under Page Layout, click on Set Print Area. So now that area is the print area. If I click Print now, that's the area it's going to print. Does that make sense? The other things I want to do is if we go under, let's go under Page Setup. Let's bring up everything. So click on the expand there. Go under Margins, and let's center this horizontally. Now let's center it horizontally and vertically. I probably wouldn't do that normally, but let's center it horizontally and vertically. And then go under Header Footer, under Custom Header, put Invoice for Tickets, and click OK. And click OK. Now instead of printing this to a printer, we're going to print it to a PDF. And I don't know if you guys have done that much, but we can do that over here if we go to File. And then this works for all Office applications. If we go to Save and Send, then I can send using email, save the web, save the SharePoint. But what I want to do is create a PDF XPS document. And then click Create PDF XPS. Let's call it theater, whatever yours is, and let's just throw invoice at the end of it. And then click on publish. What it should do is create the PDF, and because we have open file after publishing checked, it should open it up in it did. It should open it up in Adobe Reader. But it also saved it in that location. You guys with me? Okay, X out of that. Not the worksheet, but the PDF. And let's stop recording. So hit the stop button. Okay, now let's change some of the data so that we know that this worked. Let's change the name. So the next customer comes in and it's Miko and he bought 10 tickets. And now I want to print him an invoice or email him an invoice or whatever it might be. You know, we could automate all those things. But I want to run that macro I just created. I don't want to go through setting the print area again, setting the header, setting the margins. I don't want to do all that again. So if I go under the developer tab and go under macros, it has a listing of the macros that are in this workbook, and click run.
Dr. Miko, how did you get rid of your validations? Because I won't clear. Like for the name, I won't let me put the name in.
If you go to that cell, to the data validation, at the very bottom it says clear all.
I have clear validation circle, then I'll have to clear all.
No, if you go under data validation, and click on data validation
Oh, I
again,
should click it. Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, I see.
and at the bottom there's a clear all.
Gotcha.
Okay. So I ran this. Did your macro work? So it did exactly what we did, step by step, but it did it like that.
Let's see. What was our shortcut? Control Shift P. Let's see, Miko. Let's see if we can get that to work. Control Shift P. Okay. Now that automatically invokes that macro. It work? Okay. Now we're saving this. I want you to save this somewhere, and we're going to save it as something a little bit different. You see, we typically save as Excel workbook, but because we have a macro embedded in here, what's the typical extension for Office 2010 Excel file? That's XLSX, right? When it's macro enabled, it'll say XLSXM, okay, for macro enabled. So save it as macro enabled. And I'm going to save this on my desktop as Theater Miko macro. And it's saved. Now next class, we're going to build a macro that builds kind of a list of all of our cells. So every time we enter a ticket cell, we're going to want to copy this transfer data over here to the end and build, like a spreadsheet of our information. Module 8, we're going to have an out-of-class quiz. We're not going to have an in-class quiz. There's also going to be 2 cases. One we're going to do in class. Maybe we'll do it Friday and Monday, and one outside of class. And I think I made that all available on Blackboard this morning. Okay. Any questions at all? Okay, have a great day. Colin. Thank you.
We won't be here for softball.
Softball, okay.
Where do we go? How did you get these up again? Is it just find name, apply it?
I'm sorry.
How did you get these up? You have to like paste them? Is it just define name? Apply?
Yep. Oh, thank you.
Like, there's like two of them that were ridiculous. So. That's fine. I'll try to- Can I grab that document?
Yeah, let's go.